5 seconds to go. And
the atomic age entered with a bang. After a long 6 years of fighting raging in the Pacific, the nuking of Hiroshima and Nagasaki was the doorway to a new era. Shortly after the celebration of victory, President Truman began to deliberate on improving the efficiency and destruction of the atom bomb. In July of 1946, the U.S. evacuated those who lived near the Bikini Atoll. This was around 200 people, and they were forced to relocate on their own. It was a perfect spot to test nuclear weapons for the U.S., and there are only tribes living there, so they had no social or economic power to speak out about the horrors being tested on their islands. We never informed the Marshallese people that we were going to destroy their home, and the survivors of these tests said they were forced to leave their home, going to another island that already had an established society, and try to make a living there. The U.S. then tested 2 nukes on the atoll, and thus began the destruction of the Marshall Islands, the home of 10,000 people at the time. As the nuclear race between the U.S. and the Soviet Union continued, President Truman executed Operation Greenhouse and Operation Ivy. During Operation Greenhouse, 500 citizens were forced to evacuate, and 4 more nukes were detonated on Eniwetok Atoll. Operation Ivy began the testing of hydrogen bombs that could be used up to 1,000 times stronger than nukes. In this operation, the first H-bomb ever was created and used. Its name? Mike. Mike was used on Eluge Lab, a 3-mile-wide island in Eniwetok Atoll. By the time the smoke of the explosion cleared, the island had been vaporized and replaced by a mile-wide crater. And then on March 1st, 1954, the U.S. made the largest nuclear mistake in its history. Earlier in the morning of that day, preparations for conducting an operation began with Eniwetok Atoll. As the hours, then minutes, ticked closer to 6:45 a.m., the U.S. felt no need to evacuate any of the atolls in the Marshall Islands, not even the atoll this operation was conducted on. Of what awaited them, and thousands of others for the decades onwards, will leave a lasting legacy. One that has known of fire, radiation, and generations of trauma. This is the worst nuclear incident in American history.
An error in the design led to Castle Bravo being 1,000 times as powerful as the infamous bomb used on Hiroshima in World War II. The explosion itself caused fallout that spread to many surrounding atolls that were still inhabited. This fallout looked like snow, and as it began to settle on neighboring atolls, children played obliviously in the deadly powder. Extreme amounts of radiation spread more than 100 miles in all distances and even killed various Japanese fishermen at that distance. The radiation was measured to be more than Chernobyl and Fukushima. Fallout from Castle Bravo was found in Japan, parts of Europe, and even the United States, which is more than 6,000 miles away. The blast and radiation has continued to this day and has caused the death of another estimated 75,000 people. Another survivor, Dries Langrus, said they were used as human test trials. They were not evacuated until 2 days after the explosion, and the US only cared about collecting the data. It was almost as if they were guinea pigs. The fallout relating to Castle Bravo was not limited to ashes and radiation. Political controversy arose from the bombing, including from the Indian president at the time, who called out the US directly. Despite this, nuclear testing continued further in the atoll. Finally, in 1958, the US executed Operation Hardtack, the last series of nuclear tests on the Marshall Islands. This operation included 35 nuclear tests on the Eniwetok Atoll. As the operation went on, health concerns rapidly increased, causing the US to relocate operations on another island. In 1977, they tried to cover up much of the tests on the Marshall Islands by constructing a mound of radioactive dirt, 100,000 yards in diameter, then placing a 350-foot wide, 18-inch thick metal dome on top of it. This is known as the Runit Dome.
Rising sea levels have reached the rim of the dome, and scientists predict the dome will be completely submerged by the end of the century. This can either break down the metal covering or shift the dome completely. Leakage of radioactive materials have been identified seeping into the local lagoon. Marshall Island leaders do not have the economic power to solve this problem, and the U.S. continues to contest that the current situation poses no threat. The president of the Marshall Islands cites responsibility in the U.S., stating that they were the main perpetrators for these inhumane, horrendous tests and should be held accountable. Throughout the history of nuclear testing, Our Marshall Island natives have never had any dictation nor a voice. The Marshallese government was not even provided with adequate annual radiation testing, let alone proper containment. Their smaller political influence hinders their ability to speak out, in other words, have a proper say in the matter. Hundreds of cases of thyroid cancer were reported each year, correlating with radioactivity. To this day, the Marshallese people remain displaced, with some areas being so radioactive that islands once teeming with life have all fallen but silent.
Marshall Island authorities demand the U.S. to fix the Runit Dome or find a permanent solution to properly disposing the radioactive waste. The U.S. promised they would contain the radiation many decades ago, but even now nothing has been done to fix the Runit Dome. The Marshallese people are not even demanding money for the many health problems they face every generation. Attempts to sue the United States in federal court were proven futile, as the case was rejected. If the U.S. refuses to help the Marshall Islands, nothing can be done to fix the ever-growing problem. The U.S. claims they will eventually find a long-term solution, but with no solution presenting itself at the moment, the only way this can be resolved is if the U.S. government is held responsible. Despite the inaction and indifference of the government, there are a few ways we can help. We can raise awareness for the topic in our local community. There is an organization known as the Canoes of the Marshall Islands that protects the culture of the Marshall Islands through the money it gets from donations. There are many organizations such as Cultural Survival that are asking for donations to support the protests of Marshallese people. The Marshallese people can only hope that the Runit Dome will not falter with the following years. Although the dome conceals the radioactive waste, it is a grim and constant reminder of the horrific events that took place during Operation Castle and Ivy.